Team presents.
Look, man. Look, bloke. Welcome all to the Jokatech podcast. Yeah, baby, it's been a while. But I just wanted to touch on this situation with Benn versus Eubank Jr. It's come out as a shock to many that the fight had to be called off due to Benn testing positive for clomiphene in his system. Now, this wasn't revealed until 2 days out from the fight, but it was known 2 to 3 weeks prior. And it was kept on the hush because the promoters and others involved were trying to find a way to cover it up and keep the fight going. For monetary purposes, of course. Now, danger has to be considered. Because you are, irregardless of Eubank Jr. being the oversized fighter, putting him at risk if you're putting him in the ring with someone that has something in their system. That's just the truth of the technicalities. I believe he still possibly should have walked away with a victory, but it's still a risk nonetheless. All these weeks, it's seeming as if Eubank Sr. is overreacting. He wants nothing to do with the fight. He's saying it should be called off. It should be boycotted. And it's seeming as if he's saying this all because of the weight cut. His son cutting 2 to 3 more pounds than he's used to cutting, which seemed a little bizarre. He didn't even take part in the all-access footage or the coverage that they do with the fighters before the fight. None of the interviews, but you did see Benn there. Now, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, I know Eubank Sr. to be a cerebral guy. He's very cerebral. He wouldn't be acting like this for nothing. And his son is cerebral too. His son knows what's up. Now it's clear their behavior was because they knew about this positive test all the time, all the while doing these videos and interviews and promotion events for the fight. They knew. And they were having a clash in-house where Senior is saying, okay, son, we both know this. Pull out. And he's saying, Dad, no, I still think I can do this. But to the cameras, he's not allowed to say that much. So he would always have these awkward kind of interactions to the point where they stopped even asking about his father. And they just focused on the history between the two of them and what they wanted to do for the legacies. And now you understand why they were doing that. But you saw Benn was there, proud, happy. He knew as well. Remember, this was revealed to the promoters and to the commission weeks ago. So he's in there doing those interviews, happy as a clown. Because he's hoping he's going to be able to pass his son through and he'll go into the fight juiced and he'll walk away with the victory. That's why he was so confident, even though his son is 2 weight classes lighter. Now, the interesting thing is, he got popped for clomiphene, which is a fertility drug, which is really just used by cyclers in order to balance their hormones out after going through PED cycles. So he's actually was taking heavy PEDs prior to the clomiphene. And the clomiphene is what gave him away because that was still in his system coming off of his cycle. But the thing about it is, if you understand sports and you know training and conditioning, I always say there's something that you go by called a baseline. There's a baseline. And sometimes it can fool people because they think it's just the most chiseled or jacked person. That's the one that's likely juicing. No, it's the person who's furthest from their baseline. The first thing I do when I look at an athlete, I look at, if I'm watching or following them for any length of time, I look at their baseline. Where are they at in a relaxed state? Because you always have a pump state and a relaxed state. When you're training, be it a week's worth of training, a workout, a training camp, whatever the case may be, you're going to have a pump stage that's going to rise you from your baseline, but it's only going to raise you but so much. And that's the parameter. That's where you kind of work within. When you start.
Mile for rate.
A bright world, a dark child grew up in a bright world corrupted with pain. See paradoxes? Can you blame him thinking life is a game? And every vice that he runs to amplifies his pain. What you know about danger that's too close to touch, or silence so loud it's making the walls crush. And present he's crazy, when he's gone then he's a genius mind. A legend at the rim faking out then he's frozen in time. We were young then before age was a crime. Hold his hand across the canvas, tell him it's gorgeous if he takes his time. Easy to rush to the battle when you never felt defeat. Part of my technique, like weak, the best wolves grow with the sheep. When I'm hopeful, it's like fool's gold. Dreams keep me out of the cold, but all of that weighs on soul. It isn't that snakes weren't always a cold shoulder. My skin's thinner, I think of that now that I'm older. Walk like an Egyptian, and I write like a physician. The studio is my pyramid, the mic is my prescription. You never see how great I was inside of a prison. In war against the people I felt, I'm Sonny Liston. But extending outside of that and spiking, you have something going on. And I always use John Jones as an example because John Jones is skinny fat. He's always been skinny fat. If you see him at baseline, even when he's a month out from a fight and he hasn't really, maybe a little more than a month out from a fight and he hasn't really ramped up training camp yet, he's started to prepare, and you'll see him in an interview and you would expect to see some kind of physicality, but you'll notice non-existent arms, flat, flabby chest, a gut, and toothpick legs. And that's his baseline. Baseline meaning active, staying ready, but not really ramped up in training yet. That's his baseline. So when he trains, he's only going to rise so much from that. When you started seeing those fights around when he started getting popped for peds, you saw him go from that baseline, which is established, to all of a sudden, huge delts, loaded traps, puffed out chiseled chest, neck 2 times a stick, cut up abs, 8-pack, zero body fat, toothpick legs become stalks of steel. It's completely obvious when you analyze the baseline. But if you go around and you only look at him in training or for fights, it won't be as noticeable. You have to look at where is his baseline, because training is not going to take you but so far. If that's what you are at base, genetically, you look at the person's parents as well. What does his father look like? Now the Eubanks, it would be easy to say, okay, Chris Jr. looks like the one who might be dirty. Look at his father though. His father is a jacked, chiseled dude, naturally. He walks around normally pretty chiseled. What he looks like after fight camp is not that far from how he walks around, nor is it that far from how his father looks. If you look at Benn and his father, flabby, sort of a soft physique, even though they're gritty in personality, in physique, they both tend to get very flabby and soft and they spread out a little bit. That's how they are. And if you look at Conor, you've seen the same thing. Early in his career, you go back to early fights, go in between fights, you'll see this flabbier physique. That's just their natural state. They don't naturally hold definition. But all of a sudden, during this training camp, I'm seeing him pose with pictures where he's standing next to his father and he's got these shorts on and he's got these huge quads that are cut up like an Olympian. abs, cut up chest, cut up arms, 2 times as thick as he was before. And I'm like, that's not just somebody who's coming up 2 weight divisions. That's somebody who's extremely far from their baseline. Extremely far from their baseline. Because you got to remember, just because he fights at 140 doesn't mean he's 140 pounds. Everybody who fights at a weight cuts to get to that weight. He's walking around heavier than that. He's likely walking around about 150 if he's just doing it the right way. So he's not that far from the catch weight they agreed on of 157. So there's no excuse that he was adding bulk and so he did. No. The dude was juicing clear as day. It's a night and day difference, his physique. So now he gets popped and all of that begins to make sense. So people are crying because it was canceled, and rightfully so, because a fair point made is all the money spent by fans on tickets is going to be reimbursed. But traveling expenses, hotel expenses, work expenses, none of that's getting reimbursed. And then the undercard athletes are not reimbursed. The money they spend on their training camps is just lost. And that's where I think the lawsuits have to come into play. I've never heard about the lawsuits covering that kind of stuff. Whenever I see these PED situations, they either give the fighter a slap on the wrist and a slight suspension, or nothing happens. But I think there need to be lawsuits, heavy lawsuits, that are imposed on the commission, because ultimately, not the commission, but the promoters and the athlete who caused this. And they need to split it between them, because ultimately the promoters are the ones that can choose to continue the show or not. They chose to hinge this entire pay-per-view on this one match. So because this match blew up and there's no way to save it, essentially they don't feel there's a need to continue the pay-per-view at all. That's on them. But they did choose to cancel it. So while it's not trying to shift blame from Conor because he's the one that popped for Peds, still it is the promoter that has, especially knowing weeks out that he was caught. You could have done something to salvage the event. But you're costing undercard fighters a lot of money. You have to have some responsibility. A lawsuit should be put in place that makes sure that there's compensation for all the undercard fighters. At least that much. And it comes out of the pocket of the athlete in question and the promoters. They split it or whatever the case may be. That would be fair. But I just had to give a little input on that because it is a very intriguing situation, and I've really never seen it brought to light like this, and I'm interested in how it's going to be handled.
Mile for rain.
Yeah.